Hey David, I was looking at your conversation you were having with Jack there, and I wanted to put my 2 cents in about the question of faith. So in order to answer your question about faith, I'm going to have to break it down to 2 separate definitions. So the first definition is the definition you're speaking of, and that is the definition of faith of the word that we are given. And that is to say that we are fed ideas and concepts by our parents, by our pastors and whatnot, when we were children, and we blindly accept those premises for truth because it comes from a respected and reputable and highly esteemed source. And so as our rational capacity advances, then it becomes the responsible thing to do away with those concepts that we have in our minds that do not hold up against the burden of proof. And so we come to an age where the tooth fairy is discarded, and we come to an age where Santa Claus is discarded, and then we come to an age, if there is no evidence presented, that the God of the Bible is a myth and that Jesus Christ is just a historical figure. I understand that, and if you were 28 years old and you had not been given any evidence or proof that God is real and that Jesus Christ is real, then I would do the same thing. Absolutely, I would do the same thing. So that leads us into the second definition of faith, which is a faith that Jack and I would claim to have, and that is a faith that is based off of a third evidence aside from rationality and logic. And what we would argue is that we have been given a revelation of the heart from a supernatural source. And that was not because we necessarily searched for it or because it was our will to believe. It was something that was put upon us. It was something that was done to us as passive beings by God. And it's the third sense that we came to this understanding. And even when I first accepted it, did not come all together in my mind. I knew it was truth, but it was still so utterly complex that I knew I would never understand it. And so that's the definition of faith that we would go by and we would claim to have. So that obviously brings a diametric problem that what must be spoken of, and that is, why are some given this revelation and others are not? And that would have to be conceded to the complexity of God and God's individual plans for each individual, and that our belief system is of the opinion that everyone is given that revelation of the heart at some point in their lives. If you look at my videos, you'll see I make a reference to a gentleman in my church that did not receive Christ until he was 72 years old. Now, why God would allow someone to live for 72 years and not know that he's there is beyond my explanation. But I can say this, is that God does not favor people per se, and not respect, not at least after Christ. And that the person who was given that revelation is no more deserving, no better than the person that hasn't been given that revelation. And the person that hasn't been given that revelation hasn't been given that revelation for a reason. So that's the best explanation I can offer up for that. But having said that, I have to say that a wrong premise has surfaced and has been around for a long time amongst the Christian church about their presuppositions about atheists, and that many Christians like to assume that an atheist has that revelation of the heart, and rather he's just suppressing it for personal reasons and thus consciously rebelling against God. I would say that's erroneous. I would say that we cannot see your heart, so it's only the right thing to do to assume that we don't know, and that we have to assume that you just have not been given that revelation yet. Now, Jack and I have been reading The God Delusion, and I'll say from getting through halfway through the book that Richard Dawkins' explanation against theism, his assertions against theism, based off of rationality and logic, do make sense. That only using the rational mind as reference, that there is more evidence to suggest that God does not exist than there is that he does exist. And I'll say that. I'm okay with saying that. I have no problem with saying that. And so I understand the atheist viewpoint. If you have not been given that revelation, then people such as myself, Christians, we do seem delusional and potentially dangerous. And I will say there are those amongst us who are delusional and potentially dangerous. And Richard Dawkins argues that moderate Christians who don't let their faith get out of hand, provide a protective blanket for those who are extreme and who are dangerous. And I would argue that that's not so much the case. That those who are diligent in their relationship with God, with their study of Scripture, that they are wise enough to recognize those who are delusional and those who are dangerous, and to call them out, which I have absolutely no problem doing. If I see a Christian doing something, that doesn't represent Christ, that's displaying an attitude of superiority or hatred towards another, then I do call them out, and I think that's only right to do so. So I do understand, that to an atheist we all seem delusional and potentially dangerous. So I can understand why you would say something like that. But I would also argue that's not necessarily the case with all of us. And for those who it is not the case with, we take the responsibility and we do call those people out. So with that thought, I would like to open up the conversation to you. I'd like to know what you think. It was good talking to you, and talk to you later.